And that's interesting because most of the media is focused on Michigan and Dearborn, which we've been, but it's a pretty big issue here too.
I believe that Harris's refusal to differentiate herself from Biden in any meaningful way, and very specifically not to call for a ceasefire or an arms embargo, will cost her Michigan, but it might well cost her Pennsylvania and Wisconsin.
Please support the only independent outlet going across the United Corporations of America on the ground, covering what the corporate media covers up.
Hey, it's Jordan. I am in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which will be very important in terms of who wins the presidential election, because Wisconsin is obviously a critical swing state. But before we get to all that, we want to talk about local issues that matter here. Talking to the perfect person, State Representative Ryan Clancy. And I did not know this, but you are, I guess, the first socialist elected in half a century?
Yeah. In the Milwaukee area, first socialist elected since the 50s. And then along with Representative Madison, the first socialist to take office at the state in 86 years.
So do the Republicans who control the legislature, do they make you go through like a special...
Oh, it was wild. I mean, they know socialism is like a bad word, kind of catch-all phrase on Fox News. But the first couple of weeks was like, oh, you have like human hands and you eat like real human food. It was strange. So.
Wow, that's interesting. So, Wisconsin, for people that have been paying attention to politics, it's been in the news over the last decade. Former Governor Scott Walker took a battering ram to unions, public education. Now there's a Democratic governor who might not be as bad, but not exactly doing what you and I probably believe. Tell us what are some issues really going on here that are not getting the coverage when people focus on Wisconsin for the election?
It's it in some way parallels what we see in other states and everything else, but it's a lot of folks marching to the right, unfortunately, or sliding to the right on different issues. Just this morning, unfortunately, the Wisconsin's Department of Transportation closed 2 park and ride lots because, not because they weren't being used, because people use those to get to work and everything else, but because we had folks who were sheltering in their vehicles in those park and ride lots. And although we were trying to work with them to get them safe and supportive housing, the DOT stepped in and is going to close those immediately. The problem there is clearly not the people who are unsheltered. It's the fact that we have a housing crisis here, like we do in other parts of the country. But it is bad, and I think making sure that we're focusing on solutions to the actual problems rather than just trying to throw money in very punitive ways at the results of those problems is an issue.
Glad you brought that up, because obviously just everyone has been focused on inflation for the last couple of years, but I believe there's been like a 30-year inflation called gentrification. I call it economic terrorism personally. Right. But I mean, there's a couple blocks downtown that are beautiful, and then the rest of the city looks a lot different. Can you kind of talk about the gentrification that's gone on here and how much has housing gone up?
Yeah, it is frustrating. And, we here in Wisconsin, we actually pay more as a share of our income in property tax and therefore rent than almost anybody in the country. So I know Wisconsin's number 5, Milwaukee is definitely number 1 within that. And that's a list you don't want to be on. Right. And, every day, when I was, knocking doors for my primary, I talked to folks who were like, I love this community, but I can't afford to stay here. And there's both a combination of rent and property taxes, which are terrible ways to get money from people. They're not progressive at all. So we have to do a much better job on that thing, because we're really squeezing the folks at the bottom. And we need folks who are going to advocate for policy to fix things like that.
And can you kind of talk about, in Milwaukee in particular, there's been a lot of investment for police in Milwaukee, less so for public education, actual things that, working people need. Kids. Talk about the investment in police here.
And it's not an investment, right? I mean, it is. We are throwing money at a solution that we know does not work, does not keep us safer, and all the data says that. I was at a conference up in the Twin Cities, years ago, and they started out by saying, "Can you believe that 1/3 of our city budget goes towards the police?" And I'm here like. Because Milwaukee's is almost half of our municipal city budget goes towards the police, and yet it's clearly not doing what people think that it's doing. And
While I'm assuming the mayor, Democrat, is showering tax breaks on big corporations.
Yeah, absolutely. Showering tax breaks on corporations and developers. He is well funded by them, but also throwing even more money at the police than what they requested. So what happened last session at the state is that they passed something called Act 12, which requires that Milwaukee specifically does not cut its police department. So rather than cut dollars or positions. So the police came out with a wild budget that was way more than what we've seen before. And the mayor, rather than saying, no, we just have to get this down to where it was, actually said, no, we're not going to go with this. We're going to give you even more money, which is unprecedented, right? And again, is not keeping us safer.
Is he getting kickbacks from the police? Like, why would he give them more?
I mean, certainly, he has the support of the police unions. Certainly I don't. They threw, I think, more than $20,000 against me in this last primary. Because
that's
I point out what the data says.
That's a lot for a local state rep.
That's a ton. They're putting out full-page ads saying, how I hated the police. It was wild. And I don't hate individual police officers. I hate the idea that we're throwing so many of the resources, as you noted, that could be used on things which actually make us safer and a better place to live at something which doesn't. We could be investing those dollars in schools. We could be using them in public spaces like this. We could be using them for infrastructure. We could use them to actually reduce the number of people that we incarcerate every year. Here in Wisconsin, we incarcerate more of our black population than any other state in the country. And it is staggering. And increasing the footprint of the police is just going to make that worse.
And to be clear, not that I'm endorsing Republicans, there's a Democrat governor here, Democrat mayor.
Yep.
I mean, the state legislature is Republican, but the Democrats are in control in the biggest cities, Milwaukee and Madison, correct?
Unfortunately, what we see is that some conservative Democrats do side with Republicans on matters of punitive things, on police and prisons. And those things have been terrible. I mean, we saw our Democratic governor, who has done some good things, campaign on the idea that he was going to reduce the prison population and then have signing ceremonies for legislation which increases criminal penalties, legislation which is written by Republicans. And you frankly can't have it both ways. You can't say on the one hand that you care about not incarcerating people, because we know how terrible that is for communities and families, and on the other hand, keep backing legislation that locks more people up for more years for more crimes.
And can I ask you, because we've been doing a 3-state trip, so we've been in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and now Wisconsin, and I mean the TV commercials for the election are nauseating, but there's a lot of crime hysteria in multiple states, mostly coming from Trump. From what I could tell, violent crime is going down in a lot of major cities. But you would think if they're giving the police more money, the only sensible thing, obviously there's a major crime surge.
Right.
Is that the case here?
It is. No, I mean, violent crime is going down here in line with where it's going down, in other places too. And there is no correlation between police spending and that drop in crime. And it is frustrating to see people continue to try to manufacture that. And it is wild to see the police say, on the one hand, everything is terrible and there's crime all over the place, so give us more money, when the obvious retort to that is, we've been giving you half of our budget for an incredibly long time. So if you're saying it's getting more violent, then it seems like giving you all these resources that could be going elsewhere is not working.
And it seems that not just here, but everywhere, mostly comfortable white politicians can't fathom that sometimes crime goes up because people are economically desperate.
Right. No, and that's just it, right? And the data is really clear about that, right? I mean, when we invest in community rather than investing in locking our community up, things get better, crime drops, and it makes us a better place to live. I mean, I want to live in a community that is safer because we have great parks and public spaces, and that people don't have to struggle to make ends meet, rather than because we have a cop on every corner, which does not work.
And can you talk about, because there's obviously Wisconsin in particular, I think Biden only won Wisconsin by like 20,000 votes last time. It's very, very razor thin. I hear different things. It's moving more to the right, but some polls have Harris up. Forgetting that, do you feel like statewide there's been a shift to the right among?
No. And I would say that the polls that have, using a top-of-the-ticket candidate at this point is an indicator of whether we're left or right is just not accurate.
Okay.
And I think hasn't been for a while. I think Wisconsin is moving left, but we've moved left enough where we have far more than that small margin that Biden needed to get elected the last time, voting uninstructed in the Democratic primary and saying,
which is Wisconsin's version of uncommitted.
Exactly,
Okay.
yeah, it's our version of that. Uninstructed just sounds like we're dumb, but it's actually instructing the delegates not to vote for a specific person. And we had more than the number of those marginal votes saying, no, we're not going to vote for a candidate who is complicit in genocide in Palestine. And that was the salient issue there.
And that's interesting because most of the media is focused on Michigan and Dearborn, which we've been, but it's a pretty big issue here too.
I believe that Harris's refusal to differentiate herself from Biden in any meaningful way, and very specifically not to call for a ceasefire or an arms embargo, will cost her Michigan, but it might well cost her Pennsylvania and Wisconsin as well.
And I should actually mention, just this morning I saw we're sending 100 troops to Israel and anti-missile systems. So that's Biden is still president, but
and that is I mean, Biden is president, but Harris saying explicitly that she cannot think of a single thing that she would do differently than Biden is both pragmatically terrible if she wants to win the election, because I do not want 4 more years of Trump. It's also very morally wrong, and I think, looking at the polls, it is wildly unpopular to have candidates who are not taking any substantial action to end the genocide in Palestine.
I also find, obviously you have the moral depravity of the whole thing, but the more people we speak with, I mean, we were just in Michigan. I walked into the National Action Network rally. I mean, I'm thinking these are Harris people, vote blue no matter who, African Americans. I spoke with 3 older African American women. I'm expecting Harris supporters. Right. 2 out of the 3 were leaning Trump, and part of it was just, we're giving all this money to Ukraine and Israel and so many places, and here it's just gentrification and tax breaks for the developers. And so I think there's a lot of just people are starting to wonder, why are we just snapping our fingers and sending money outward? Some of those places, whatever, people could have different views. Sure. But I think a lot of people are just fed up with their cities crumbling and us sending money everywhere else.
Yeah, and I have to say, I mean, I'm in favor of sending aid where it's needed, but aid does not look like, incendiary devices. It doesn't look like bombs. It doesn't look like missiles, and it doesn't look like the political cover that we've been giving to Israel for far too long.
And in Wisconsin, can you kind of give people a feel? Is there a sizable Arab American population? Obviously, there's a lot of younger voters. Is that kind of why you think she could lose here?
Yeah, I'd say that, there's a sizable, Arab and Muslim population, including some, many Palestinians here in districts all across the state. And, they are demanding and asking folks who claim to represent them to also represent, them and their families. We also, do have a lot of younger voters. When I was knocking on doors, I'm still knocking on doors for other candidates, I see very, very few people who were trying to decide between, Harris and Trump based on anything of substance. I saw a ton of people trying to decide between, trying to decide between Biden and just staying home and sitting this one out or voting for a third party. And that's why it's so key that Harris has to differentiate herself and do the right thing. So,
also, you look at Harris's campaign, on one end you could say, well, she had much less of an on-ramp because obviously she came into this late. But on the other end, it just seems like, I mean, we're probably of the same ilk, burners. Bernie, whether you loved him or hated him, it was very clear what he was for. Medicare for all, free college, Green New Deal. With her, she's offering kind of these, I believe, technocratic positions. And, we were driving and there's billboards. Kamala Harris supports raising the minimum wage. To what?
Right.
How are you going to do it? Like, it just says supports it. So it just seems like it's kind of this running a very calculated, safe campaign, not to offend anyone, therefore everyone. It's designed not to offend anyone, and therefore it doesn't inspire anyone. And again, we're trying to get people off the couch and out there and engaged. And when they're hearing very calculated statements that don't have much substance, it's hard to do that. Right. Can you talk about Wisconsin in particular? We've talked about gentrification. A lot of people don't realize there's a major lead problem. I mean, people think Flint, and I've covered that for 8 years. I have a book that just came out about Flint, but Milwaukee might have one of the worst lead and water problems in the country. I don't really see that as an election issue. Can you kind of tell viewers about that?
Yeah, I mean, it is everywhere. I mean, we assume, I've assumed in every house that I've lived in Milwaukee that we have poisoned pipes. I have 5 kids, and it's been, a series of, getting out there, researching the best filters and all that, because, lateral pipe replacement is incredibly expensive. So I am glad that eventually it sounds like maybe there's some, money in the pipeline to do that for everyone. It's not going to be fast enough. Mm-hmm. It's already led to terrible health disparities in this city, as well as others, and it's well past time to do that. So,
yeah. And you also told me before, this is the first election with kind of new maps, because gerrymandering's been such a big problem. I mean, everywhere.
Yeah.
Can you kind of describe how bad was Wisconsin gerrymandered, and how does it look now in terms of...
At least based on some criteria, Wisconsin was number 1, maybe number 2, number 3 in terms of how badly gerrymandered we were. We've had many elections where, folks at the top of the ticket have won as Democrats. The state assembly right now, only 35 out of 99 seats are Democrats. In the Senate, the Republicans actually had a supermajority. Wow. So in terms of getting things done, they're almost irrelevant, because the Republicans there have the ability to overrule everything. So
is that largely because they carved out the districts?
Exactly. Yeah, and that was just due to the maps. That's not due to Wisconsin being right wing or something, except for presidential candidates. All the data is really backing up the idea that it's been incredibly gerrymandered. This election is the first one under the new, fairer maps. They're not perfect. We had a couple of options. We don't have the best maps right now, but there's a path, certainly for us to get us closer to that 50-seat threshold that we need to actually get hearings on a lot of the things that Wisconsin residents want. I put together packages on housing, on conditions of confinement, on ending cash bail, like these wildly popular things, which the Republicans would not even give hearings. So.
And I assume here are the Republicans doing a lot of the cultural distractions like elsewhere with trans bills. And
this last session we had 24 anti-trans bills, and it was I was one of the offices that kind of helped rally the troops around those, and it was on the one hand really inspiring to see those communities come together and push back on it, and they were successful, and they either were withdrawn or that the governor, to his credit, vetoed all of them that made it to his desk. But it was also just exhausting to see folks have to get together and testify over and over and over again for their very existence. And it was brutal. I mean, the testimony there was incredibly well done. But I didn't realize the extent to which so many of the anti-trans folks, they're not coming from next door, they're not coming from our communities. They're flying in from other state houses and giving the same testimony they gave in Montana, Florida, Virginia, right? So on the one hand, that's terrible. On the other hand, it makes it really easy to counter, because all you have to do is watch that testimony and then say, well, I know exactly what this person's going to say. Like, here's how to.
So they're basically exaggerating a problem that isn't really a major problem.
It isn't. And yeah, it is. I think local Republicans are using it as an issue to try to get their constituents to the polls. But when I'm knocking doors across the state, I don't hear Republican, leaning folks say, that's a salient issue or a really, really big issue, unless it's been put in front of them by somebody pretending to represent them.
Another electoral question. Obviously, we're 2 white dudes, but I'm sure you talk to some of your black constituents. Not just in Wisconsin, we're hearing, more black men in Michigan, Pennsylvania seem to be gravitating towards Trump. Are you hearing or seeing any of that here?
No, I'm seeing the Democratic Party not pull in, I think, black and brown and young voters in a way that they could be, and a lot of that comes through policy. So, I can't obviously speak to the specifics of why.
Because we know in 2016, in particular, Hillary Clinton underperformed, particularly in Milwaukee, among black voters.
Yeah, and what we saw in 2020 was black voters. So we have organizations, amazing ones like Black Leaders Organizing Communities, here led by Angela Lang. And the concern that I've heard her voice is that every 4 years, folks say it's really important for the Black community to show up, but that we don't do a good job as electeds of showing up for the Black community in all those areas in between.
The rest of the 3 years?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And kind of last question, you're kind of, I think the left, however you want to, working class,
For sure.
left,
Guilty.
is pretty, well, my audience is a little exhausted and disenchanted. You come from the Bernie wave of 2016 and 2020. It's hope, it's love. It's like, wow, we might actually get somebody in the White House.
Yeah.
Then so many people were knocking on doors for AOC and others and have become disenchanted with them. And you're kind of, a guy, a lone wolf in the wilderness, so to speak. There are progressives and even some socialists in city councils and assemblies across the country, but not many. What would be your message to the left? Because it's unfortunately going to be Harris or Trump, and the left is still not going to have power on the federal level.
Sure.
But to me, it's not as sexy, but building from the local level can be just as important.
Yeah.
What's your message to a left that's kind of just like fed up and went from Bernie to like the return of neoliberalism?
Yeah. I mean, find your local leftists. I think one of the things, it was incredibly tough for me to be, the first socialist in the Milwaukee area for so many years, and then to be the target of so much antipathy, hate, both from the right and also from conservative Democrats. And then we saw another. We saw, Juan Miguel Martinez join the county board. We saw Missy Zambor become a director at the school board, and now we have socialists at the state level too. And it gets easier when you have that solidarity, and all of us, communicate together as much as we can. And it's that support, and also the support that I find from other local electeds and state level socialists across the country. There are networks of folks. And it is so refreshing to be in spaces, like physically with them, because you don't have to spend 20 or 30 minutes at the beginning of every conversation saying, arguing about like everybody should have food and housing. Like those are all given. And then you talk policy and you're like, oh, here's how I was able to pass the right to counsel, giving everybody an attorney if they're facing eviction. And they're like, that's great. Here's how I was able to do, a ballot initiative to do this. And it is, I think, individuals can get that same sense of solidarity and purpose and potential by connecting with your local leftist, socialist, working class officials and saying, how can I help and how can I put you in contact with other folks who are trying to do the same thing and making those principled stances too.
And also there's stronger tenants unions popping up in cities, mutual aid groups, et cetera. So, a lot of people focus on the federal, which I understand, but there are things going on locally.
Absolutely.
One more, just to circle back. If Kamala Harris wins Wisconsin, what would be the reason, in your opinion?
If Kamala Harris wins Wisconsin, it's because she did the right thing on Palestine. She took substantial action to bring about a ceasefire, and then called for an arms embargo and promised to do that once she took office.
And if she loses, I'm assuming the opposite.
It is because she refused to differentiate herself from Biden in any substantial way, both on Palestine, but also on immigration, on trans rights, on things that the folks who are trying to decide whether or not to show up in November really matter to.
And I buried the lead. You've been to Gaza.
I've been to Gaza.
So this is definitely very important to you, and from what you're saying, a lot of the voters here.
Yeah, and it's, I can't have seen those things, and this was back in 2011, but it was still a terrible situation. This is the preamble to a genocide that's been happening for 75 years now. But you don't need to have been there to understand how wrong the situation is and our role in it.
Not that we could get in her brain, but this is not my first rodeo. Right. You think it has maybe something to do with the donors? She doesn't want to offend the donors that are ardent pro-Israel Zionists?
Yes, and I think there have been so many places along the line where I'm like, oh, this is it. Harris is going to do the right thing here. And one of them was the massive amount of small dollar donations that Harris got, early on, right after, she was crowned, the nominee. And that meant that practically she didn't need those major donors. Like, it would have been a great thing for her to do the right thing there. And I understand that sometimes people need that little push. That huge number of small dollar donations should have been the kick in the pants to do the right thing, because she didn't need those big donors, and I'm afraid that's going to cost her the election.
And I should say you're running for re-election as state rep, so where can people find out info on you?
It'd be clancyforassembly.com.
Is it the number 4 or?
I spelled out FOR.
Okay.
I was
Thank
an
you.
English teacher. I'm not going to use the number.
He was a teacher too. I left that out. So teacher, socialist, you're one with the community, so the right person to talk to. Thank you for talking
Thank
to
you
us.
so much. Appreciate that.
Absolutely.